My name is Greg Johnson. I'm the director of the Concord Institute, formerly known as the Community Health Foundation. We're a charity located in London, established in 1976 by a macrobiotic teacher named Bill Tara, who's still around practicing macrobiotics and teaching. I've been the director of this organization since 1994, about 16 years now. My practice of macrobiotics began in 1970 on a road trip, hitchhiking across the United States with a dear friend of mine. And for no apparent reason that we can remember, we just became vegetarian. We arrived out on the West Coast, and we come across a book by George Osawa, Zen Macrobiotics, and we started adjusting our diet to more in the macrobiotic vein, and stayed out on the West Coast for a period of time and headed back to New England and joined up with some macrobiotic people who had been studying with Michio, and that's how we got our start. And it's been almost, next year will be 40 years, a 40-year journey. And we came in on an interesting wave of practitioners, the late 60s, early 70s. People like myself were kind of exploring different inner states of consciousness through drugs and so forth. And we realized that constant use of drugs wasn't going to take us to the promised land as we thought initially. So we were looking for some natural means by which we could continue to explore consciousness, raise consciousness. And as we read more and more into the literature of macrobiotics, practiced the cooking, began studying with Michio, we began to see macrobiotics as a viable path to raising consciousness, to exploring consciousness and developing oneself. And as Michio at that time, his teaching was more oriented towards order of the universe and cosmology, we were really attracted to that kind of teaching, and became ardent and diligent students of his. I moved to Boston in, I think, late 71, early 72. It was a wintertime, I remember, and joined a study house run by Duncan and Susan Sims, and also those other friends there like Vern Verona, Lenny and Barbara Jacobs, and other old-time friends. And I got a job collecting dirty laundry at a motel on Beacon Street in Boston. And then within a few months after that, I got my first job in the macrobiotic community as the produce manager, handling all the organic produce for Erewhon trading company, one of the early, if not earliest, natural food stores in the United States. Shortly after that, I became the store manager and had 22 people working for me, and I was continuing my studies at Arlington Street Church with Michio once or twice a week, and was just part of a wonderful community in Boston with people, numerous study houses, restaurants, educational facilities. It was the beginning of the East-West Foundation and so forth. Macrobiotics, you could say, was booming at that time. It was spreading throughout the United States. Natural food stores were popping up everywhere. Educational centers were happening in Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, all along the East Coast, West Coast, and in Europe as well. Several of Michio's students, one particular period of time, several of Michio's students had come back from Japan and shared their experiences in Japan. And I became very fascinated with the idea of going to Japan and perhaps learning firsthand what life was like and where these teachings came from. And in 1974, I made my way to Japan with about $50 in my pocket, and ran out of money in the first week and scrambled and got some English teaching jobs, and eventually stayed there pretty much for the next 10 years, up until about 1985. I did various things. I taught English. We lived in various cities, mostly in Kyoto, the ancient capital of Japan. I met my wife there in 1975, Mutsuko, now. We've been married, must be coming up on 34 years now. And we've got 5 wonderful children, all organically grown, all raised macrobiotically. We avoided immunizations. We've had very little need for any kind of extra medical help other than, our natural macrobiotic treatments. So we're quite grateful in that respect. And so we stayed in Japan for quite a long period of time. I also opened up a natural food store in Japan called SN Natural Foods in Uji, which is a small town, part of the Kyoto prefecture, town noted for tea, Uji tea, Uji cha. And we lived there for quite a period of time and ran a natural food store for 3 years. At that particular time, there wasn't a great deal of interest in traditional Japanese food, so we barely scraped by. We returned to the United States in 1985, and both my wife and I wanted to make sure that our children were raised and had experience in both cultures. Upon coming back in '85, I eventually got back to teaching and other kinds of work. There was a period of time when in the 70s, where we made a trip back to the United States for a couple of years and opened up one of the Erewhon stores in Brookline Village, and later assisted the Kushis in opening up the Kushi Institute on Station Street in Brookline. And I happened to teach the very first classes of the Kushi Institute for the first couple of semesters before we returned back to Japan. That was around 1977, 78, around that period of time. And then in parallel with my work in macrobiotics, I've had a long time interest in the body of work of transformation and technologies and methodologies that literally transform human consciousness. And we in the macrobiotic educational tools have not yet acquired those kind of tools and methodologies. So one of the things with our organization that I've been attempting to do is weave in these, you could call them inner technologies, to affect personal transformations, to see if there are other dimensions, states of consciousness available, and seeing macrobiotics in the light of that. Macrobiotics has more or less become recognized as a healing modality in the last several decades, where people in my generation came in more for spiritual pursuits, and the healing factor of macrobiotics was a secondary phenomena. And so I'm attempting to kind of bring back, for me anyway, and anyone who's joining us, bring back macrobiotics to the original spirit of a more cosmological tool, practice that will enable us to develop ourselves on many levels, many physical, spiritual, energetic, etc. So that's the work that I've been engaged in a long nutshell.